Started.
Happy evening to all of you. Welcome to today's knowledge updation online series 2 on Code of Ethics critical issues. We have with us CA R.S. Balaji sir. Thank you very much R.S. Balaji sir for accepting our invitation at a very short notice. Actually today the session was about to be handled by Shivaguru Subramanian from Salem. But due to last minute emergency, he couldn't make it out. And as soon as we request R.S. Balaji sir at the last moment, he readily accepted. Thanks for your magnanimity and you are always available at the calls. Thank you very much. We will start today's program with the invocation of ICAI Motor Song. Rilvan, please play Motor Song.
येष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति येष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्विमाणः निर्विमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तदेव शुक्रब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तदूनात्यपि कश्चन एतद्वैता 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 एतद्वैता.
Thank you very much. Chandanam Sitalam Loke, Chandanatabi Chandramaha, Chandracha Chandana Cheva Sitala Sadhu Samgadihi, which means sandal is cooler. Moon is cooler than sandal. The company of learned people is coolest of all. So today we have one such learned person, R.S. Balaji sir, on behalf of Office of SIRC of ICAI. We welcome you, sir. It's my privilege to introduce R.S. Balaji sir. R.S. Balaji is a commerce graduate. He is a practicing fellow chartered accountant, specialized in audit and indirect taxation. He is also a certified peer reviewer by Peer Review Board of ICAI. He is a co-opted member of Auditing Assurance Standard Board of ICAI, 2019, 20, and 21. He's a member of Academic Council of Sri Shankara Arts and Science College, Kanchipuram. He is a member of Editorial Board of Padukas Publications. He is a faculty for the following subjects for chartered accountant students: Auditing and Assurance for a CA Intermediate, Advanced Auditing and Professional Ethics for CA Final, Indirect Tax Law and Information Systems and Control Audit for CA Final students. He has co-authored a professional book, Padukas Company Law Ready Referencer. He has awarded as a best outgoing student and secured college first during his college days. He is a regular speaker at various professional forums on subjects like GST, standards on auditing, peer review, audit quality, maturity model, etc. He has completed certification course on international taxation as well. With this brief, I have great pleasure in presenting before you CA R.S. Balaji sir, who will take us through Code of Ethics critical issues. Over to you, sir.
Yes, namaste. Good evening, one and all present here. It's indeed a pleasure for me to be a part of SIRC's Knowledge Initiative program. And thanks, Rahman sir, for making this arrangements in a very swift manner. Because of the change in a faculty, I can totally understand when there is something program and plan. If there is going for a change, definitely a change management is obviously a very hectic aspect, but you are in a position to rightly handle it. Thanks for your kind words of introduction also. Very good evening, dear participants who are virtually online and others who are listening through the virtual mode through YouTube channel and other social media. It's my pleasure to be part of here to share the aspects relating to Code of Ethics, which is considered to be the base lifeline of the chartered accountants. Entire institute is working based on the trust that is that the people is having on this particular CA institute. A chartered accountant in practice is always considered to be a person of trust and integrity, where a regulator from the institute's perspective, it tries to introduce and develop these sort of ethical perspective, so that the members who are always upheld this particular profession with their high quality performance of audit is remaining in the same pedestal, is what the expectation of the institute as well as the regulators and various other stakeholders. As a part of our knowledge sharing activity, let us understand certain critical aspects relating to code of ethics. Being a chartered accountant in practice, or whether a chartered accountant in service who is into employment also, whether this particular code of ethics will be applicable on me, what are all the specific parameters that I need to take care relating to the code of ethics, or the way in which I do my professional attest function. So let us go and understand this particular code of ethics with the background of the recent publications of the institute, pronouncements of the institute with regard to the code of ethics, and also we have professional ethics that is a part of our CA Act here. Dear members, the requirement, there is something called as expectation gap, audit expectation gap, which is somewhat understood in a different manner. One important aspect with regard to knowledge expectation gap, audit expectation gap, is relating to the performance gap. Performance gap is what auditors are meant to do the activities, and actually what actually they do it. The difference is something called as performance gap, which is to be tried to be filled in, where this code of ethics will play a very, very vital role in ethically how I am going to handle my attest function, especially when there are threats. See, on one hand, we have a pressing commitment relating to the clients, where there may be different needs. There may be a loan arrangements, there may be a borrowings, or there may be a fund arrangements for them. On the other hand, where there are legal and regulatory front also, which wants certain aspects to be complied with and to be looked into and then to be reported by these independent auditors. When we have this both perspective, managing this is considered to be very, very important task, and professionally we do that in a very right way all along. And let us also focus relating to the code of ethics legal provisions or a regulatory provision, and what are all the safeguards that we may be in a position to implement, what are all the threats that could be there, how we may mitigate those threats, is what the particular perspective of today's discussion shall be. The code of ethics critical aspects, we have different dimension parameters. One is with regard to the standards on auditing, because predominantly my attest function will be on an audit function only, predominantly. Though there are possibilities of reviews and also assurance engagements other than audit and review of historical financials. Predominantly being an auditor, the major time that I spend on the audits of historical financial statements, where the standards on auditing wants me to comply with various regulatory perspective. So how I may be in a position to comply that is one particular dimension. You also have a CA Act 1949, which is my mother act, which empowers all these professionals to do, whether I am into practice or I am into service, where there are certain requirements that I need to comply with. That is the second dimension, where we have critical issues like Companies Act compliance, where you have section 144, which prohibits a person to do certain type of services, managerial services, where restricted services are there. At times, whether the services, whatever that I do to my client, will it be falling under section 144? Will there be a disqualification? Or there are criteria like a business relationship with regard to the Companies Act disqualification is concerned. So whether an activity that is performed by a chartered accountant in practice, will it be treated as a business relationship with that entity? Whether a disqualification will be triggered based on Companies Act or not could be an important aspect to be looked into. And lastly, we also have the code of ethics, which is predominantly explanatory in nature, where they try to give a hand-holding activity, how we may be in a position to rightly get out of all these tangles and how we may be in a position to comply in the right track, is what the code of ethics, which is in a fourth dimension, sorry. There is one another dimension that I would like to add, especially in the in this today's context, where we have peer reviews that are getting mandated. When there is a peer reviewer who is appointed by the institute, comes and looks into the practice unit, whether am I geared up, whether am I able to establish, or whether am I able to demonstrate that I have always ensured the code of ethics has been complied with, which is one of the part of my SQC. My standards on quality control always wants this any engagement to be performed in an ethical manner, the way in which I accept an engagement, the way in which I continue an engagement, the way in which I evaluate to continue that particular engagement. All these are all very important keynotes that being a practicing professional that I need to take care, apart from doing my performance activity in a right auditing skills. Ethics, which is always may not be defined with a precise formula. It is like this. This is what ethics like that. No one may be in a position to define within a perfect formula, which is very functional in nature. It signifies how people act in order to make the right choice and practice good behavior, which is all something very important to be applied for. Ethics are the foundation of our accounting profession, especially with regard to the auditing profession. The working to the highest standards of ethics and professionalism allow the public or the investors or even the regulators, maybe the government, to have confidence in this particular chartered accountants. In India, with 75 years of experience now, the institute is making a beautiful march towards this successful career of 75 years in guiding the people and also being a partner in national building. It's absolutely because of our forefathers have made this particular profession with high quality ethical behavior. That is what that we are enjoying this particular pedestal here. Where we were always trying to, from the institute perspective, they are always trying to create a dynamic and a contemporary code of ethics, which is at a par with international levels. Even international IFAC also comes out with the code of ethics at periodical intervals. Now, institute is also updated with that particular code of ethics, and there are further fine-tuning changes and all is being done to ensure that it is at the highest standards. Excellence, integrity, independence, which is all the hallmark of the profession, are being always enshrined in the code of ethics. And there is also an important technological changes as well as is happening, where I may be in a position to compete with an AI today. If that being the case, unethical practices or advertisements or through other modes, there are a lot of challenges that have been put into the profession. So how I may be in a position to have a cutting edge over this particular technological scenario is also a part of our thought process here. There is, I always love this particular case study, which is a very, very old case study and an English-based case study, which talks about an importance of the skills and competency set for a professional. A beautiful depiction of this particular judgment. Let me read out so that one can appreciate this. Every person who enters into a learned profession undertakes to bring the exercise of it reasonable degree of care and skill. What is expected from me is only reasonable degree of care and skill. I need not exhibit an absolute degree of care and skill, which may not be possible. That also may be different from person to person. So what is expected is only to exercise and rebuild a reasonable degree of care and skill in my professional way. He does not undertake, if he is an attorney, that all events that he shall gain his case, nor does a surgeon undertake that he will perform a cure. Exactly. Assuming that you go to a lawyer, an attorney, whether he may be in a position to give you a guarantee that I'm going to win this case, may not be. He may be trying his level best. And then it's all depends on the facts and depends on the particular position. Similarly, a doctor, a surgeon, where there is a problem and health problem, and then you go to his particular service, he may not be in a position to guarantee that I'm going to save you or this particular surgery is going to always be ending up in a successful note. But what is expected from him is to ensure that he has taken all best reasonable care and caution. Exactly, this is what this particular judge also says in this Lamfair versus Fifos, where an attorney that all times he shall gain his case, no, he cannot undertake that. Similarly, a surgeon cannot undertake that he will perform a cure, nor does he undertake to use the highest degree of skill. There may be persons who have a higher education and greater advantages than he has, but he undertakes to bring a fair, reasonable and competent degree of skill. Exactly here, that is what expected from a chartered accountant also. It is not that I may be in a position to come out, say for example, I am expressing an opinion on a financial statement that even though I give an opinion that it is free from material misstatements, that to my best of my knowledge, based on the information explanations that is provided, I may be in a position to give an opinion that the financial statements are in all material aspects and is free from material misstatements like that. I may be in a position to comment. That doesn't mean that I'm providing an absolute assurance on this particular financials, where what is expected is only reasonable assurance. But that's what that a chartered accountant may also be in a position to give. Why that particular reference is brought in here? Because in order to ensure that particular reasonable degree of care and skill, it is not only the way in which I verify the accounts, I verify the numbers or the disclosures, but also the skill set that I possess. Say, for example, a professional skepticism, having a critical mind, having a questioning mind, or being an independent, having an independent approach, ensuring that the objectivity is not compromised in any of the aspect in which I do the audit. Like that, all these are all a part of skill set that should be automatically with the chartered accountant who does this particular audit will be a part of my reasonable degree of care and skill here. I always feel the activity of a chartered accountant based into two criteria. One is conformance and the other one is performance. Performance is what that usually we focus on, like whether have I done an opening balance verification, have I done a previous year comparison, have I obtained an audit evidence relating to this particular number transaction, whether the ratio analysis is getting tallied, whether external confirmation has been obtained or not. With regard to the numbers and it's the way in which I'm going to express an opinion, the verification aspects and the compliance aspects that I look into the numbers will be on the performance part. That is on one end. That is also an important end. But on the same hand, there is something called as conformance part. That is from the auditor's perspective that I maintain all the required skill set, all the basic necessities in relation to being a qualified person to do the particular audit. Say, for example, my basic pillars like integrity, the objectivity, that is nothing but to express an opinion in case of a financial statement, or in case of any other assurance service, the nature of that particular service, the independence, which is always considered to be an important factor, where as per standards and also as per ethical perspective, independence is actually comprising of two aspects. One is independence in mind and the other one is independence in appearance. So the visibility in independence, it should not only be there, it should always appear to be there. That is considered to be a most important aspect. That's why we have all the policies. SQC policies also talks about it. Say, for example, whether in your firm are you having an independence declaration policy, whether every year, irrespective of the partners or paid staff or article assistants, whether they give a declaration that they act independently, that they have not compromised, they are not being influenced, they are not verified in a biased manner. Like that, are you getting an independence declaration at least to demonstrate to that particular effect the independence is not compromised? Even there are questions in SQC like every acceptance, before acceptance of a particular engagement, whether the engagement partner who is going to be designated, is he exercises a independence activity. Say, for example, assuming that you are going to take up an audit of a company where there are disqualifications relating to financial indebtedness with regard to the partner or with regard to the entire firm's concern, or guarantee by a relative, whether any of the relative is a director or a key managerial personnel, whether are you having business relationship, are you having shareholding, like that, where there are a lot of points to be noted into, and they need to comply with, and then they need to give a declaration to this effect. None of the disqualification comes and attracts. A very straight, simple example will be one of my partner would have got a loan, housing loan from one of the banks, say, for example, State Bank of India. He's having a housing loan for assuming 25 lakhs. If that being the case, my firm is actually not eligible to take up any type of audit or attest function relating to that particular bank, because one of the partner has indebted in excess of 5 lakhs with regard to the value as prescribed under the Companies Act. I may not be in a position to carry out stock audit. I may not be in a position to carry out concurrent audit for that matter. I may not be in a position to carry out statutory audit, branch audit and all, where there are parameters that is getting affected. So I need to have a mechanism within my firm stating that what are all the relationship, what are all the influences, what are all the impact, indebtedness that may cause a disqualification. Like that, within the firm, they need to have a database so that at every particular intervals that it has to be updated, including the shareholding. Today predominantly many people have a demat account and they trade in the shares. If that being the case, being an investor, I may be in a position to do that, no problem for that. But however, because of this particular trading activity, because of the fact that I may be holding a share, I become a disqualified person from being appointment from that particular company. So periodical updation of this and then getting captured within the firm's database, and then a quality partner or an independent partner of that particular firm looking into whether are you qualified, are you disqualified, whether any of the criteria is getting affected or not, shall be a self-evaluation mechanism. Please understand, it is not that someone else externally they need to come and verify. It is not QRB to come and verify. It is not NAFRA to come and verify or PRB to come and verify. It is the self-evaluation technique that we need to have as a standard process, so that my independence is getting obviously maintained, and my independence is not compromised in any of the aspects here. Confidentiality, another important perspective as part of the auditor's basic pillars. The skill set and the competency, including periodical updation of knowledge and the updates to my entire team of the engagement team. All these are all part of my basic aspects relating to ethics. Is it mandatory to comply with code of ethics? What will happen if I don't comply with code of ethics? Is it recommendatory in nature or is it mandatory in nature? Let us understand, code of ethics is mandatory in nature because in my Companies Act, as a duty of the auditor under section 143(9), where we say that auditor shall comply with auditing standards. So there is a specific prescription from the Companies Act that you need to comply with standards. You need to comply with auditing standards. That is nothing but those standards that are issued by ICAI, which will be vetted through NAFRA, which is a separate government agency under section 132 of the Companies Act, which is constituted. And then NAFRA will be recommending to MCA that these are all the standards that is to be adopted at the time of doing the audit. Like that, they may be prescribing. Again, MCA will be prescribing these auditing standards, the standards on auditing as issued by ICAI, which is to be mandatorily complied with by the auditor here. So when the way in which I need to conduct my audit is as per standards on auditing. This particular standards on auditing, the mother standards on auditing is SA 200. That particular SA 200 requires the auditor to do the audit in a prescribed manner. The first and foremost requirement of SA 200 shall be ethical requirements to be complied by the auditor. Please understand, indirectly as well as directly, the ethical requirements are there mandatory for the auditor to comply with. I reiterate the facts that I need to do my audit as per standards on auditing. Institute also says that, my Companies Act also says that. The standards on auditing, the mother standard is SA 200, where that particular mother standard SA 200, the first and foremost requirement of that itself to comply with ethical requirements. I need to do an audit in a qualitative and an ethical fashion. So ethical requirements are always mandatory, which is issued by ICAI. Apart from it, there is something called as legal and regulatory requirements. The legal requirement is a Companies Act requirement. However, with regard to the regulatory requirement, is nothing but ICAI, which is my governing body, regulatory body for the audit function in India, where they prescribe this particular code of ethics to be mandatory to be followed here. Where even in my audit report, just a minute, I will try to show you latest audit report of a largest corporate in India, where we just for example purpose and academic purpose, I go with sharing the recent annual report of Reliance Industries Limited, which is a listed entity, where in order to just to show you the importance, independent auditors report to the members of Reliance Industries Limited. The opinion paragraph is being provided by the auditors in this regard. We have audited the accompanying standalone financial statements of the so-and-so company, which includes joint operation, which comprise the balance sheet, the statement of P&L, the statement of cash flows, and other statement, the statement of changes in equity for the year then ended. The notes on the standalone financial statements, including a summary of significant accounting policies and other explanatory information. In our opinion, and to the best of our information, according to the explanations given to us, the aforesaid standalone financial statements give the information required by the Act. that is Companies Act, in the manner so required and give a true and fair view in conformity with Indian accounting standards. That is nothing but the accounting standards, the Companies Act compliance, and other legal and regulatory requirements. The company says that it reflects true and fair view. Very good. Fine, sir. On what basis you have given this particular opinion? Immediately, as per SA 700 revised format, after the opinion paragraph, we need to include this particular basis of opinion paragraph. In this basis of opinion paragraph, on what basis that I have given this sort of opinion, the auditor declares, it's a voluntary declaration that is provided by the auditors. We conducted our audit of the standalone financial statements in accordance with standards on auditing. That is what mandately, as specified under section 143(10) of the Act. Our responsibilities under those standards are further described in the auditor's responsibility for the audit of standalone financial statement section of our report. There is a separate paragraph called auditor's responsibility paragraph, wherein the auditor will be stating what are all the various responsibilities that we will be satisfying. We are independent of the company. Exactly. From here onwards, the ethical perspective is getting included. We are independent of the company in accordance with the code of ethics issued by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. So an auditor, that's why the heading of this particular report by itself will be an independent auditor's report. It is not simply an auditor's report. Always the independence is a part of my profession. We are independent of the company in accordance with the code of ethics issued by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, together with the ethical requirements. That's also a part of it, ethical requirements that are relevant to our audit of the standalone financial statements under the provisions of the Act and the rules made thereunder. And we have fulfilled our other ethical responsibilities in accordance with these requirements and the ICAI code of ethics. So in my audit report itself, the main head of my audit report itself, I need to include this particular paragraph as per SA 700. This particular paragraph will not only be included for this particular entity. Sir, this being a listed entity and a big entity, we need to include this? No. This particular point shall be included in every such audit report that is given by the auditors, whether it may be a body corporate, whether it may be a non-body corporate entity, whether it may be a trust. Everywhere, whenever there is an audit of financial statements, I need to comply with SA 700 formats, which is a globalized format that we need to go and give this particular declaration, including compliance of code of ethics. It is not only that we give this particular declaration, we need to actually comply with the code of ethics and then to give this particular declaration. Otherwise, it will be meaningless. So we believe that the audit evidence obtained by us is sufficient, appropriate to provide a basis of our audit opinion on the standalone financial statement. So the point that I am driving here home is where we shall be always be required to comply with the code of ethics and also the ethical requirements relating to the code here in relation to any sort of audit function here for that particular matter. Let me go back where, sir, this is as per Companies Act you are talking about. Only as per company 143, this, that and all, NAFRA and all will be applicable. I'm going to do a audit of a non-body corporate, whether for that also this will be applicable or not. Yes, maybe directly from the regulatory perspective, it shall be applicable. I need to necessarily comply with code of ethics. I don't have any other option. This is what that I have told you as per SA 200. First and foremost requirement is ethical requirements that is to be complied with. The auditor shall comply with relevant ethical requirements, including those pertaining to independence, relating to financial statement and audit engagements, which includes independence, objectivity, professional competency and due care, confidentiality, professional behavior. All are very, very subjective. Whether this particular behavior is a professional behavior or not shall be dependent upon the circumstances and based on the situation. But however, what do you mean by professional behavior? What is the minimum parameters relating to professional behavior has been very much rightly stated in the code of ethics here. Independence comprises both independence of mind as well as independence in appearance. This is what that we have already seen here. If code of ethics is not followed, sir, what happens? ICAI code of ethics has mandatory compliance provisions, hence non-compliance of the same shall be treated as a misconduct under section 22 of the CA Act. If I don't comply with, then automatically it will be treated as a professional misconduct, because my CA Act talks about, like the section 22 of the Act, 1949 CA Act talks about this particular specific provision. Professional misconduct is an act or omission as defined under the first schedule and second schedule of the CA Act. We have two schedules to the CA Act. Every act may have certain schedules which may contain certain annexures or other examples also. Like GST Act, we have Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3. Companies Act, we have schedules. Similarly, CA Act also we have schedule, first schedule and second schedule. Both first schedule as well as second schedule talks about the professional misconduct of members in practice as well as professional misconduct of members in service. Both are getting addressed in this particular regard under first schedule, under second schedule also. Sir, when something is addressed in the first schedule, then what is that there in the second schedule? First schedule talks about different set of transactions or events which will be falling under the first schedule, which will be treated as a professional misconduct. Second schedule talks about different sets of events and conditions which will be treated as a professional misconduct or other misconduct, and then which will be falling under the second schedule, which have different legal consequences and implications here. What is this professional misconduct and other misconduct? It is as defined under the CA Act itself, where we have first schedule of the CA Act contains 4 parts: professional misconduct of members in practice, professional misconduct of members in service, and then professional misconduct of members generally, whether you are into practice or service, it will be covered. And lastly, as a residuary criteria, we have other misconduct of members generally. So it covers both members in practice as well as in service. Similarly, we also have a second schedule to the CA Act, which contains 3 parts. One is professional misconduct of members in practice. Again, professional misconduct of members generally. They don't have a specific clause like professional misconduct of members in service as that of in first schedule. And lastly, we also have a residuary clause, other misconduct of members generally. Like that, we have 2 important schedules which we may be knowing it, but we may not be in a position to directly apply it on a day-to-day basis. Please try to apply it on a day-to-day basis. Even a simple activity may be coming under this particular schedule. Without our knowledge, we may not have taken that much of seriousness about those activities, which will be end up in a huge impact on the practice here. The disciplinary matters, usually how it goes for, the code of ethics and disciplinary matters are also always going hand in hand, where there may be a complaint against a particular chartered accountant can be given, whether he is in practice or he may be in service. The board of discipline, the director's discipline will prima facie form an opinion whether you have a case or not. If it is yes, then he is having 2 choices. One is to go with the board of discipline or to go with the disciplinary committee, which is more powerful than board of discipline. So you have two authorities where there may be in a position to go for a further learning of that particular issue, board of discipline as well as disciplinary committee. Why this bifurcation? Because any of the activities or conditions which are stated in the first schedule will be going to board of discipline. Normally, it will be going to board of discipline. Anything, activities or conditions or misconduct that is referred in the second schedule shall be going to disciplinary committee. Disciplinary committee being a powerful committee, having a higher weightage, they have a powers to go for a second schedule matter, or at times based on the volume, if they want, they can also take up the first schedule aspects also. But board of discipline is having powers only to take a first schedule, and they may not go for second schedule here. That itself may be indicating second schedule is more powerful than first schedule, the activity stated. The second schedule, because the second schedule activities are relating to the functions of the profession, including the way in which audit has been performed. However, with regard to the first schedule is concerned, they don't talk about the performance related aspects. They only talk about ethical and behavioral aspects, including how to get the clients, whether solicitation, advertisements, and other aspects will be covered under the first schedule here. Both is having legal repercussions where we may have a reprimand, or the membership removal can also happen, or penalized can happen here. However, under the second schedule, we have permanent removal of members could also be possible. Penalize of rupees 5 lakhs up to 5 lakhs and all is also possible. There is also an appellate mechanism with regard to filing an appeal against the orders of this particular committees. That is also possible here. But the point that we need to understand here is the first schedule and second schedule, which is having 4 parts and 3 parts as described, my dear friends. where these are all the clauses that are there in that particular first schedule and second schedule, where we have 12 clauses in part 1 of first schedule, 2 clauses in part 1 of second schedule, 3 clauses in part 1 of third part in first schedule, and 2 clauses in part 4 of first schedule. So we have different clauses under different parts. Similarly, the second schedule is also having these particular numbers. The point of noting will be the first schedule, part 1, will be discussing about independence and conduct of members. With regard to the second part, we'll be talking about the integrity and trustworthiness. The third part will talk about the misrepresentations that are being made, that should not be made, is what the point. And lastly, the other misconduct will be talking about an activity of bringing disrepute to the profession. Whether or not in his professional capacity or not, if he brings disrepute to the profession of ICAI, then there is a possibility of action on this particular ground. That is possible. Similarly, second schedule predominantly talks about the performance of the professional assignments. It is on identification of material misstatements, identification of sufficient appropriate audit evidence, non-maintenance of confidentiality, and all will be falling under the second schedule, including the compliance of various regulations of the CA Act, and also bringing disrepute or being treated as a person who is guilty of an offense punishable with imprisonment exceeding 6 months will be treated under the other misconduct. For guilty of an offense punishable with imprisonment not exceeding 6 months will be coming under the first part, fourth schedule. If it is greater than 6 months, it will be coming under the second part, that is second schedule, third part. I would like to go for certain specific aspects, even though these are all the clauses that we talk about, certain specific aspects that let us go for analyzing here. Enters into partnership. Clause 4 of part 1 of first schedule talks about enters into partnership in or outside India with any person other than the specified person, being a chartered accountant in practice. See, the first schedule, part 1, talks about professional misconduct of members in practice. So it is applicable only to members in practice. So on that, clause 4 talks about if at all I enter into a practice and if at all I enter into partnership in or outside India with persons other than the specified person, he shall be guilty of his professional misconduct. Who are all the persons with whom I can enter into partnership? Say, for example, a company secretary, a cost accountant, a lawyer, an actuary, or an engineer. Like that, we have people with whom I can enter into partnership. And also membership, there is an accountants duly recognized by the institute, who are all the members of outside regulatory body, including Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales and all, with whom I can enter into partnership. If at all I am entering into partnership with person other than these particular persons, the person will be guilty of his professional misconduct. In this regard, I'd like to bring the notice of a new regulation by the institute, something called as MDP, Multidisciplinary Partnership, where institute is open now. Even though the MC also wants this to happen, the other professional bodies are yet to make certain regulatory changes in this particular regard. However, it may be practically possible for a chartered accountant to enter into partnership with a cost accountant or with a company secretary, practicing company secretary, and all is possible. So we need to look out for those professionals with whom I can enter into partnership. With the persons other than this particular people, if I enter into partnership, so business has not conducted. The moment I enter into partnership, that itself will become a disqualification in this particular regard to be a member here. Please be careful on that particular front. Securing any professional business by means which are not open for a chartered accountant, or solicitation of clients or professional work either directly or indirectly by circular, advertisement, or even personal communication, or through interview, or by any other means, all will be treated as an advertisements in this particular regard. Securing business, solicitation, and advertising all are prohibited primarily, and within the parameters it is to be done, and there are specific guidelines that is also issued in this regard. Very importantly, the clause 8, where people may not take it up very rightly here, accepts a position as an auditor previously held by a chartered accountant without first communicating with him in writing, then there is a problem. The moment I am going to accept a particular audit engagement without first communicating with him in writing, if at all I have taken up, then there will be a professional misconduct as per clause 8. Similarly, clause 9. without first ascertaining whether my appointment is valid as per the Companies Act, whatever the provisions that are to be followed has been followed or not, without ascertaining the facts, if at all I have taken up the audit, if at all I have accepted the auditor's position, then he shall also be guilty of his professional misconduct. So these are all something clause 7, clause 8, clause 9 and all will have a very high practical impact. In our daily day-to-day affairs, it may happen. Say, for example, now onwards, we may have to have a tax audit season. So individual audits are over, that is income tax returns filing, consulting and all over. Now we need to move on for tax audit sessions and Companies Act compliances and all. In case of a tax audit, assuming last year there was a client who is coming to me this year. Last year he was under a different auditor who has done a tax audit. And now this year he says that, sir, the previous auditor I am unable to identify, or he is not focusing on me. So you please take up the audit. If that being the case, can I take up the audit immediately? Because the client comes and approaches me, he gives an engagement letter. I very cautiously, I get an engagement letter from him and then I take up the audit. Can I do that? Or should I need to communicate to the previous auditor? Whether previous auditor communication will be applicable only on a statutory audit cases like Companies Act, or even for a tax audit, whether it will be applicable. Ignore that. Can I need to give a communication to the previous auditor even in case of an internal auditor, which is absolutely voluntary in nature? Previously, some other chartered accountant was an internal auditor. Now I have been appointed as a company's internal auditor. Should I need to communicate as per clause 8? What happens in case of a bank audit, where the RBI or the bank appoints me as an auditor for that particular branch, where previously some other person have done the audit? It is all a specific open appointment. So in that particular case, should I need to communicate to the previous bank auditor, branch auditor? Is it mandatory for me? What code of ethics says about that? Because as you all know, in case of bank audit appointments, branch audits, the timelines that are given to the auditors are very, very stringent. Say, for example, Monday only I will be getting the appointment. By Friday, I need to complete the audit or something like that. If at all that's the timeline that is given, I need to communicate to the previous auditor, wait for a reasonable time, and then to take up the audit becomes impossible for me to complete within that particular timelines. So in that case, practically there is certain other challenges. Technically, there are certain other challenges. How I may be in a position to manage both? What is the guidance from the institute? What code of ethics talks about this? My dear friends, let us understand. Code of ethics is very, very clear on this particular perspective. The communication to the previous auditor shall be applicable in case of all types of audit engagements which is previously held by another chartered accountant. So very clear that communication should be in writing. It is not only I communicate, I need to retain the evidence that it has reached the other party and then wait for a reasonable time, and then only I may be in a position to take up the audit. If that being the case, my communication as per clause 8 of part 1 of first schedule is mandatory in case of tax audit, in case of statutory audit, in case of even an internal audit also, it will be mandatory only. Please make a note of that particular case. Coming back to the bank audit scenario, where there are strict timelines are given, it is as per the Code of Ethics guidance that the incoming auditor has to communicate to the previous auditor and also give his acceptance to the bank on a conditional basis. Sir, I have to communicate as a part of my professional ethics, and I am giving you a conditional acceptance in this regard. In case the previous auditor comes out with certain objections with regard to me taking up the audit, professional valid objections, then I need to consider like that. They may be in a position to give a conditional acceptance, but however, it is mandatory to give it. There is also another query that whether can we go for email communication? You said that communication in writing, whether email communication, will it be permitted? During COVID, this was a huge problem where institute came out with a clarification in this particular regard. Email communication could be possible. It is also a valid as per Information Technology Act. However, the points to be noted is it is to be communicated to the official email ID of the previous auditor. So you need to ensure that particular communication with whom that you are making should be an official email ID of the chartered accountant, which is registered with the institute. and you need to ensure that the mail is not bounced back. It is safely reaching that particular person here. That's an important aspect to be complied with. And also clause 9, accept as an appointment as an auditor of a company without first ascertaining it. It is not that without first intimating or something like that. It is to ascertain. I need to have evidence that my appointment is valid, whatever the requisite provisions of the Companies Act, which is to be complied. Say, for example, special notice to the previous auditor, removing the previous auditor, appointing the incoming auditor, whether all the provisions has been followed or not. Say, for example, you have been appointed as an auditor to fill up the casual vacancy, whether casual vacancy is a valid casual vacancy, whether board of directors are empowered to appoint you, whether they are appointing within the timelines. Say, for example, a casual vacancy on account of resignation of the previous auditor, whether you have been intimated by the board, appointed appropriately within 30 days timeline, whether shareholders approval has also got for your appointment, like that. Various Companies Act compliances are to be there, that is to be necessarily complied with. Ascertain without ascertaining whether my appointment is valid, I cannot take it up. Parallelly, even though I have communicated, I have got the responses from the previous auditor, just like that I cannot accept. I have one another criteria as per SA 210 that talks about engaging, agreeing the terms of engagement, where there are preconditions that are stipulated in this particular regard. Whether management uses an acceptable financial reporting framework, whether management acknowledges the premise on which audit is being conducted, is there any restrictions in the scope of audit at the time of beginning itself? I need to all clear all these aspects. I need to make a documentation. Sir, how I have not been appointed even. How I may be in a position to go and verify with regard to the company whether my appointment is valid or not. Sir, they may not be in a position to give you the minutes. They may not be in a position to give you entire documents for verification. If that being the case, because I have not yet accepted the position, if that being the case, get an effect to this effect. Get an appropriate representation from the management to this effect for your working papers as a part of documentation, as a very healthy ethical practice. So you may be in a position to substantiate your claim that I have complied with. There is no irregularity or there is no non-compliance with regard to any of the clauses of the CA Act here. Like that, where there are a lot of technical perspective or maybe a practical issue, there is always a substitute or there is always a possibility of compliance. The moment you wanted to comply, that is the only trigger that we require. The moment we wanted to comply, automatically we have ways and means and modes that are available for us to comply. On the other hand, the moment there are problems that you are seeing without the solutions, always it will be a problem. We may not be in a position to comply in any of this particular front here. Similarly, clause 11, which is also another important clause, engages in any business or occupation other than the profession of chartered accountants, unless permitted by the council so as to engage, he shall be guilty of his professional misconduct. With regard to the business, other business or occupation, there are generally permitted activities that are given by the institute, like you have authorship of articles, authorship of books, you have classes, and you have holding the public officers, director simplicitor, doing agriculture. Like that, we have various activities which is permitted, generally permitted. I need not go and get a specific approval. But however, there are certain activities where we need to go for a specific approval, prior approval from the institute. Then only you may be in a position to have that particular activity, because you are also holding a certificate of practice. So parallelly holding certificate of practice and doing other business or occupation should not be possible unless otherwise it is specifically approved by the institute as a specific case here, based on the merits of the case. So we have all this that we have already discussed with regard to clause 5, with regard to canvassing. See, here with regard to tenders, there is something called as tenders with regard to profession. Reply to tenders. Say, for example, I am a chartered accountant in practice. There is a tender calling for an internal audit in a reputed government company. So can I apply for it? Can I go for tendering process? If I do it, will it be treated as a solicitation? Because I only give me this particular audit like that. Am I doing a solicitation activity? Answer is no. I'm not soliciting. In this case, offer as originally initiated by the client, and you are responding to that particular tender. In this particular respondents to tenders, you need to note one particular point. If minimum fees has been prescribed and it is for open to CS, then I can apply for the tender. On the other hand, if the minimum fees is not prescribed and it is open for CAs to go and apply, I should not participate in that tender because it's a clear-cut guidance provided by the institute. On the other hand, if minimum fees is not prescribed, but however it is open for professionals like CAs, CS, CMAs and all can participate, in that particular case, you may be in a position to participate in the tender. Otherwise, where those tenders which are open for CAs only, they need to necessarily prescribe the minimum fees. Otherwise, you should not participate in that particular activity here. So this is a specific requirement relating to tender and application relating to tenders and getting the activities there. Personal canvassing is prohibited. Advertisements by any part, including through social media and all, is prohibited. Advertises is professional attainments or services or use of designation other than a CA in professional documents, visiting cards, letterheads or signboards and all is prohibited. All these are all ethical perspective that we need to look on to. The sender must ensure that the recipient receives the communication with regard to clause 8 is concerned. I will just move on to certain specific aspects relating to the Companies Act. So apart from the CA Act, we have something specific on Companies Act compliance. We may be in a position to move on to that. Just a minute. Because of the Companies Act 2013, which is having a different perspective from Companies Act 1956, where we have certain disqualifications or ethical perspective that we need to look into very carefully. Disqualification of an auditor, sealing reports, or even fraud reporting, specifically with regard to fraud reporting as per section 143(12), where the auditor is expected to report on the frauds, where fraud reporting is never be part of my audit. Fraud identification is not my part of audit. My fraud detection is a separate activity, right? From Kingston Cardinal case that we are of that particular perspective. However, what is this particular fraud that they are talking about? There is also a CARO reporting requirement relating to fraud. Frauds on the company, frauds by the company, whistleblower compliance and all are also part of it. The moment you are thinking of the frauds, immediately we shall be in a position to have impact on SA 240 that talks about auditors' responsibilities relating to fraud in an audit of financial statement. What is expected from me here is not to detect those frauds. My responsibility is not to detect frauds. Incidentally, during the course of your audit of financial statements, if you identify frauds or if you suspect that could be a possibility of fraud, then you intimate. You come across frauds or you suspect that there could be a possibility of fraud, then you intimate accordingly. Intimate whom? I need to intimate both the management as well as the central government in certain criteria. Originally, at the time of introduction of law, Companies Act 2013, they have not prescribed any materiality criteria, but now they have modified the act, stating that ₹1 crore or more frauds offense which may involve individually an amount of ₹1 crore or more needs to be intimated to the central government also, apart from intimating the same to the audit committee or management as the case may be. So there is also a possibility of flow with regard to the timing with which the auditor needs to report on this particular regard, 143(12). And also under CARO reporting, the auditor needs to go for reporting here. Say 240, as I told you, the auditor's responsibilities relating to fraud in an audit of financial statement. In spite of the fact, fraud detection is not my criteria, but however, legally as well as ethically, fraudulent financial reporting and misappropriation of assets are the two types of frauds that the auditor needs to go for reporting, because you also have something called as NOCLAR under Code of Ethics, non-compliance of laws and regulations, where SA 250 will be squarely applicable in relation to that particular non-compliance of laws and regulation by the entity and the reporting responsibility relating to the auditor in that case. SA 240 also talks about identify weakness and communicate to the management and to appropriate authorities based on requirements. Say, for example, CARO is also based on requirement that I am going to communicate. Appropriate authorities includes RBI, maybe SEBI, or maybe audit committee, like that. There are people, different authorities that I may be in a position to go for reporting here. With regard to disqualification of an auditor, as I told you, there is something on the business relationship. If at all I do have a business relationship, I am disqualified. Person or a firm having business relationship directly or indirectly with the company with its holding company or its subsidiary company is basically disqualified. By the way, what do you mean by business relationship? Companies Act specifically defines those transactions entered into commercial purpose, but however, business relationship excludes permitted professional services as per Code of Ethics, as per Companies Act, as per CA Act and its regulation. Permitted professional service. Transactions in the ordinary course of business at arm's length price is also not covered under business relationship criteria. So the point to be noted and emphasized is those permitted professional services will not be covered under the business relationship criteria. Say, for example, I'm taking tax representation services to the client. I'm representing the client in ITAT, my own client. Will it be treated as business relationship? I'm taking some Companies Act affairs and then I'm representing the company in the Companies Act affairs. Will it be treated as a business relationship? Say, for example, some tax planning with regard to a company is being done with regard to their structuring of amalgamation or something like that, where there is a tax planning that is being provided by the auditor of the company. Will it be treated as a business relationship affecting the continuance of the auditor? Care needs to be taken. There are ample guidance that is provided under the Code of Ethics. What will be a threat under this particular criteria? How I may be in a position to mitigate that particular threat? At the moment there is a tax opinion that is given by the auditor of the company, definitely there is an advocacy threat. There is also a self-review threat in this particular regard. So how it may be mitigated? What are all the steps ethically that the company has to, that the audit firm has to take care in this regard to come out of that particular threat will be a part of my ethical compliance that the auditor needs to perform. Similarly, Section 144 of the Companies Act, which talks about auditor not to render certain services directly or indirectly, including accounting, bookkeeping, internal audit, design, implementation of FIS, financial information system, actuarial, investment banking, investment advisory, rendering of outsourced financial services, whether in-house or outsourced, where the auditor is involved in preparation of financial statement, he is disqualified from being taken up the audit in this particular regard. And lastly, very importantly, the so-called management services, which is not so precisely defined. Anything may be covered under this particular management services or such other kind of services as may be notified, where I may not be in a position to do any of this particular activity. If I do it, then there is an impact on the continuance of the auditor, or the question on the eligibility of the auditor will also be happening in this regard. So that there is also a disclosure requirement relating to Companies Act, how management services are being provided. As a chartered accountant in practice, as per my CA Act, I can do entire range of management consultancy services, no problem at all. Being a chartered accountant in practice, entire range of management consultancy services can be done, including budgeting and all. Personal recruitment and selection, I may be in a position to sit in the interview panel. But the point is, as long as I'm the statutory auditor of the company, I may not be in a position to do this because it may be treated as management services. It may be triggering the effect of Section 144 also. I need to be very careful in handling whether a management consultancy service as a practitioner I'm doing or as a statutory auditor I'm doing like that. I need to have the carve in and carve out here. With regard to the Code of Ethics is concerned, the institute is having 3 publications, 3 beautiful booklets that they have published for, which contains about the conflict of interest, how I may be in a position to mitigate it. With regard to fees, how to go for the fees fixation. If there is a pending of fees, what needs to be done. There is certain rumors that if their fees is pending, I should not take up the audit. I am barred from doing the audit like that. There are certain rumors. That is not the fact. But however, it is not an advisable way to continue with the pending fees. How to overcome that particular aspect is also a clear-cut guidance has been provided in the Code of Ethics. Acceptance of gifts and hospitalities, conduct of the audit in the ethical fashion, custody of client assets. Like that, there are specific aspects, sections that are getting covered under the Code of Ethics that is issued by the institute. We would like to have a specific review of this. All these publications are available at the institute's websites. So I request you to go and download those particular latest books on the Code of Ethics, which also talks about the first schedule and second schedule with various multiple case studies and scenarios also. So we need to make use of that particular resource that is available so that we may be in a position to do the audit in an ethical fashion and always comply with our independence, including the quality in which we do the service as envisaged by standards on quality control, SQC. Now the SQC is going for a revision. Institute is also given out with something like a draft standards, exposure standards have been given with regard to standards on quality management. Hereafter, it may not be, no longer be standards on quality control. It may be a standards on quality management that we need to go for a higher pedestal and higher scale. So I hope that all these professional developments and updates may be taken up in the right way. And then there are huge knowledge resources that could be also be available. So let us make best use of it. And then also ensure that our audit team understands this particular importance, and the engagement team is also sensitized about these important updates, and then to do the audit in a qualitative fashion. Thanks for your kind attention on this particular subject of code of ethics. This short span of 1 hour's time, I may be in a position to have a broader overview in this particular regard. At a different point of time, we maybe even go for a case study based analysis, one-on-one class wise. We may go for a specific discussion that could also be possible. I may be reached through my mobile phones as well as my email ID. In case of any queries through the institute, you may be in a position to handle this. I will also be circulating this particular presentation to the institute so that you may be in a position to have the same.
Thank you very much, Balaji
Yes.
sir, for quickly taking
Yes.
us through the critical issues in code of ethics. Thank you one and all for your time and listening. Thank you. Thank you. So
Thank
with that, we have come to the conclusion of today's program. Thank you one and all again. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.